Hello, this is Michael Silva. In this episode, we are going to talk about payment terms, the details of how and when the consultant will be paid by the client. It is important that payment terms be crystal clear at the start of any client relationship. This is so there are no surprises. Many new consultants are hesitant to talk to clients about payment terms, afraid that the client will think that asking about payment terms at the start of a project may be perceived as a sign of desperation. The truth is that most clients respect the consultant that stands up for their rights during the negotiation process and understand completely when the consultant asks about payment. The payment terms used by the independent security consultant should be similar to those used by other professionals such as accountants and lawyers. These terms typically call for some type of advance payment at the start of the project, with payment of the remaining balance occurring at the conclusion of the project or shortly thereafter. It is common for professional service providers to request an advance payment prior to starting work on a project. This advance payment is sometimes called an advance, a deposit, or a retainer. This should not be confused with the retainer fee agreement that we discussed in episode 21. Within these videos, I will be calling these advance payments a retainer. The purpose of receiving a retainer is threefold. Number one, it provides immediate cash flow to the consultant, fully or partially offsetting any out-of-pocket expenses that the consultant may occur in performing the project. Number two, it reduces the risk of non-payment for services by the client. Number three, it can ensure that the person ordering the work has the authority to do so and that the consultant is already set up as a vendor in the client's accounting system. The amount of the retainer payment is typically 1/4 to 1/2 of the total anticipated consulting fees and expenses. I typically ask for a retainer payment of 1/3 of the total amount. So, for example, on a $9,000 project, I would ask for a $3,000 retainer payment. When I first started my consulting practice, I used to be hesitant to ask for a retainer payment, assuming that the client would think I was a small-time operator by needing to ask for money in advance. When I later went to work for one of the world's largest risk consulting firms, I was surprised to find that they were stricter than I was when it came to requiring a retainer. They would not start work for even a Fortune 100 corporation until a retainer check was in hand. Some clients have policies that prevent the payment of any amount in advance, including retainer payments. For example, many government agencies are subject to laws that prevent them from making advance payments. In my consulting practice, I am willing to forego the retainer payment from a government agency that I feel will pay me in a timely manner. For most other projects, I almost always insist on a retainer payment and have walked away from jobs where the client didn't want to pay a retainer. Payment terms. When the consulting project is completed, the client should be billed for the full amount of consulting fees and expenses, less the retainer amount. The invoice should specify payment terms that state how quickly the invoice must be paid. Some commonly used payment terms include due upon receipt. The full amount of the invoice is due on the day that it is received. Net 10 days. The full amount of the invoice is due 10 days after it is received. Net 30 days. The full amount of the invoice is due 30 days after it is received. 2% 10 days, net 30. A 2% discount may be taken on the amount of the invoice if it is paid within 10 days. Otherwise, the full amount must be paid within 30 days. Some consultants offer discounts such as these to encourage fast payment, but unless you have an urgent need for cash, it is usually not worth the risk. You are paying about a 37% annualized rate of return to get the money 20 days earlier. Also, some clients may pay the invoice later than 10 days but still take the discount, putting you in the awkward position of having to go after the improperly deducted amount. Many suppliers don't bother to pursue this, which is why the client tries to get away with it in the first place. Payment terms that specify the amount of retainer payment that you require and how quickly you expect your invoices to be paid should be clearly specified in your proposal and agreed to by your client when you start work. When you are working as a subcontractor to an architect, engineer, or other consultant, the pay when paid rule usually applies. This usually means that you cannot request a retainer payment, and when submitting an invoice, you cannot expect payment until a firm hiring you has itself been paid. For example, if you are a technical security consultant working for an architectural firm, you submit your invoices to the architect. The architect then includes your invoice amount in their firm's next invoice to the client. When the architect gets paid by the client, the architect pays you. It can sometimes take 90 days or more for this process to play out. It can be even worse when you are working as a subcontractor to another subcontractor who is in turn working for the architect. The consultant at the end of the line can sometimes wait 6 months or more for payment. When I was just starting out, I did lots of projects for architects and engineers and played the waiting game just like everyone else. I have waited as long as 11 months to get paid. In my early years, waiting long periods of time to get paid was a real hardship. Now, I can easily afford to wait to get paid, but still prefer to work for clients who pay me properly. As a result, I now try to avoid working as a second or third tier subcontractor on projects, preferring instead to work directly for the end user client. This undoubtedly cost me some opportunities, but at this point in my career, I can afford it. As a beginning security consultant, you may find yourself forced to work on projects where delayed payment is a fact of life. As long as you know this in advance, you can prepare for it.